Hello, my name is Avery, and I'm going to be discussing anxiety in adolescence. So, for this assignment, I chose to focus on how anxiety affects adolescents' emotional development, specifically in ways such as emotional regulation, well being, ways of coping, and other elements in the long term. Just to define emotional development, it consists of the ability to experience, express, understand, and manage emotions, as well as recognize and respond to the emotions of others. These are skills that are still developing during this period and that could be greatly interrupted by anxiety. This is critical because evidence from McLaughlin and colleagues 2015 has shown that adolescents experience frequent and intense emotions during this time that is accompanied with an increased risk of developing mental disorders characterized by problems with emotional development specifically. I thought this would be an important topic to speak about because I personally began to experience anxiety during adolescence, and it is extremely common for the onset of anxiety to begin during this period of development. In fact, it is actually the most common psychiatric condition in children and adolescents, as it affects 1 in 12 children and 1 in 4 adolescents, and that's a statistic from Kowalchuk 2022. This figure is striking and highlights the importance of early diagnosis and intervention for these individuals. So, first, we have to answer what is adolescent anxiety. Anxiety and anxiety disorders themselves are defined by feelings of worry, unease, dread, and can cause a range of various physical, psychological, and behavioral symptoms that may affect someone's daily way of living. Some common anxiety disorders in adolescence include generalized anxiety disorder, social anxiety disorder, and specific phobias, and that is from Kowalchuk and colleagues 2022. Anxiety is much different in adolescence, though, as individuals are more likely to be worried about things like themselves in relation to their peers, areas such as performance in school or sports, how they are perceived by others, and changes in their body. And that is from Miller 2022. Anxiety symptoms will vary on the adolescent and are sometimes overlooked, but they can range from withdrawal or avoidance to irritability and lashing out. It is also important to note that anxiety in adolescence is also connected with school refusal, depression, and even substance use as a coping mechanism. And that is also from Miller 2022. With all of this to say, it is greatly important that adolescents have the support and resources to manage this challenging period of development. So, now I will touch on the ways anxiety affects emotional development in adolescence and what that looks like. Earlier, I mentioned that adolescents experience more frequent and intense emotions during this time, along with other changing emotional reactions. In addition to this, McLaughlin and colleagues 2015 found that perceptions of stress and daily hassles increase during adolescence as they encounter changing social dynamics and new stressors. These findings have some important implications for the onset of anxiety and the ways adolescents manage their emotional experiences. Usually during this time, adolescents will begin to learn how to better perceive and regulate their emotions with the use of helpful cognitive strategies like problem solving or cognitive reappraisal. But anxiety disorders may disrupt this process, and that is from McLaughlin and colleagues 2015. For example, anxiety heavily impacts emotional regulation, and that is defined as a person's ability to manage the quality, intensity, timing, and expression of their positive and negative emotions. And that is from Palmer 2019. This has been shown through a study done by Palmer and colleagues 2019 on adolescents with social anxiety disorder. The study found that adolescents displayed more reliance on maladaptive emotional regulation strategies like avoidance, suppression, and rumination. Along with this, adolescents with social anxiety disorder specifically were found to have higher intensities of negative emotions, impaired emotion recognition, and even impairments in interpretation and judgment of social situations. Along with this, a study from Lee and colleagues 2023 found that adolescents with anxiety respond to internal distress cues and external stimuli differently than those without. This has an influence on their cognitive processes, social behaviors, motivations, and ability to cope with stressful life events. And that is also from Lee and colleagues 2023. Now I will touch on self-esteem and coping styles in relation to anxiety during adolescence through a study conducted by Lee and colleagues. Research has shown that self-esteem and anxiety symptoms are bidirectionally associated. This means that those with higher self esteem levels will experience less anxiety, and those with lower self esteem levels will experience more anxiety. In fact, lower self esteem levels can often make anxiety worse. Along with this, adolescents experiencing symptoms of anxiety, which often goes hand in hand with low levels of self esteem, are more likely to use maladaptive coping strategies like rumination, avoidance, and suppression, as were previously mentioned, and pay more attention to negative stimuli in their environment. On the other hand, those with fewer symptoms of anxiety, often tied with higher levels of self esteem, exhibit more frequent use of positive coping strategies and are better able to regulate behavior and emotions. This evidence shows that self esteem, coping styles, and anxiety are all interconnected with one another and can influence each other in different ways. From all of the research presented, it is clear that anxiety affects emotional development in many ways. Now, I will discuss the broader implications that this has on the different domains of an adolescent's life by using a study by Swan and colleagues 2018. Research has shown that anxiety and avoidance behaviors can contribute to impairments in the social, family, educational, occupational, and legal domain through a multitude of ways. For example, fear and avoidance may interfere with an adolescent's ability to explore new educational or career opportunities and relationships, and may interfere with their ability to develop independence and achieve important developmental tasks. The findings of this study showed that overall, anxious youth have more difficulties adjusting to roles in any of these domains, and as a result, have lower life satisfaction and poorer functioning. These findings demonstrate that it is critical for adults to be able to recognize the potential signs of anxiety in adolescents and provide them with access to intervention methods, such as cognitive behavioral therapy and mindful techniques and exercises. And then these are the references. But in conclusion, anxiety in adolescence can be a very complex experience and can have long lasting effects on emotional development and other domains as well. For this reason, it is critical for adults to recognize these signs and symptoms in adolescence and intervene early with support.